This is section 3.3, mean, median, and mode. Mean, median, and mode are called measures of central tendency because they give you some idea of what the data is telling you without looking at every single data point in detail, especially when you have many, many data points. It's actually more informative if you have a measure of central tendency that tells you where the data is tending to lead towards. So they're measurements that help you understand the data and draw conclusions about large collections of data. So we're going to look at a couple measures of central tendency. And the first one is the mean. And you've probably used the mean before. Some people call it the average. It's the sum of all data values, and then you divide by the number of data points. So for example, if we just have 3 data points, 10, 15, and 20, to find the mean, we add them all together, and we divide by 3 because there are 3 data points. So here we would add 10, 15, and 20, divide by 3. That's 45 divided by 3. That's 15. So 15 is the mean. The median is the middle number in the set of data, but you have to order the data from lowest to highest first in order to determine that middle number. If there are an odd number of data points, it's always the actual middle number in the data. But if there's an even number of data points, you average the two middle numbers. Okay? So let's look at an example. We have some data here, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So since we have an odd number of data points, the median is going to be the middle number, so that would be 6. In the second example, we have 4 data points, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So the median, to find the median, you would add together those two middle data points, 5 and 7, and divide by 2. That would be 6. The mode is the number that occurs most often. Now, sometimes there's one mode, sometimes there's no mode because there's no number that occurs more often than any other. And sometimes there are 2 values, sometimes there are 3 values. So let's look at an example of mode. We'll look at some test scores. This would be something similar to what I would see. We would have some data here of test scores, 94, 96, 88, 62, 96, 96, 96, 94, 96, 50, 69. Now here the number that occurs most often is 96, right? It's the number that occurs most often. It's a better measure of central tendency than the median because it's showing us the most commonly occurring score is 96. That tells us that most of the class did really well on the test. You don't want to use the average or the mean here because it would be artificially lowered by extreme scores of 50 and 62. You know, something like 50 is called an outlier. We're going to see that in a couple seconds. But that's going to throw the median off and lead you to believe that the average is much lower, that the indicator of the score that's most common or the score that represents the class, it's much lower than it actually is. It would be better here to look at the mode. There's actually one more measure that they didn't mention earlier, and that's the range. And the range is always the difference between the highest and lowest values. So it tells you the span of the data. So in the case of the data above, the highest score was 96 and the lowest was 50. So the range would be 46. So let's calculate some things using some data. We'll calculate the measures of central tendency. So we have some readathon results, and that would indicate the pages read in 1 week by different students. So we have 6 students here and the pages they read in 1 week. So we're going to calculate all 4 measures of central tendency. The first would be the mean. The mean is always add all the data points and divide by the number of data points you have. So here I've added all the data points together and divided by the total, 6. And I get 292 divided by 6, or 48.7. That's the mean, or the average. To do the median, you'd have to write them in order. They're actually written in order there, from lowest to highest, 40 to 59. So here we have an even number of data points, so we'd have to take the two middle values and average them, 48 and 50. When you add them together and divide by 2, you get 49. The mode is the number that occurs most often, and in this case 50 occurs most often. We have two students who read 50 pages in 1 week, so that's the mode. And last would be the range. And for the range, you would always subtract the low from the high. You take the highest value, subtract the lowest value. So it's 59 minus 40, or 19. We're going to identify some modes now. So let's come down. Let's look at how many modes each set of data has. So in the first one, we have dollar amounts: $1.50, $2, $2.25, $2.40, $3.50, and $4. How many modes do you think are there? Take a look at that data. Because no data point appears more than once, there is no mode here. Let's look at the second example. 2, 3, 6, 8, 8, 10, 11, 12, 14, 14, 18, 20. Here you have two data points that occur more than any other. They occur twice, 8 and 14. So you actually have two modes, 8 and 14. In the third example, we're taking a survey of students as to their favorite flavor of water ice. So we've got grape, grape, banana, nectarine, strawberry, 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 orange, watermelon. So here we have one mode. That would be strawberry, because strawberry occurs 3 times, where grape only occurs twice, and the others only occur once. Now, there's such a thing as outliers. I'm sure you've heard that term before. And an outlier is a data value that's much greater or less than all the other data values. And using it to calculate central tendency, especially median, can really throw off your calculations. It really affects the mean. So we're going to look at some data and see here if one value is far removed from the rest. We took the land areas of Central American countries, and this is all in square miles. We've got Guatemala at 5,000 square miles, Belize at 200 square miles, Honduras at 6,500 square miles, Nicaragua with 4,500 miles, El Salvador at 2,200, Costa Rica at 1,200, and Panama at 2,100. Well, here when you look at that data, Honduras is the outlier. And I know that's not as obvious. Some people jump at that 200 for Belize first, but Honduras is going to be the outlier because it's the furthest away from any other data point. It's actually 1,500 miles away from the next closest data point. When you look at the 200, it's only 1,000 miles away from the Costa Rica data point. So it's not actually an outlier. Honduras is the outlier. To include that outlier in the calculation of the mean can either raise or lower it. Without the outlier here, when we take the average land area of Central American countries, we get 2,500. But when we add the outlier in, it raises it artificially by 600 miles up to 3,100. And that gives us an unrealistic expectation of what the average square mileage of the country is. It actually inflates what you think it should be. So you have to watch out for outliers when you're using mean as central tendency. You're going to see in a minute, if you have outliers, mean may not be the best indicator of central tendency to use. So here we're going to look at what measures of central tendency are better to use in certain situations, depending on what the data is. Like I just said, if there are outliers, the mean's not going to represent the data. So it would probably be better to use the mode or the median. What number occurs most often, or what number is in the middle of all the data. So let's look at what would be the best indicator of central tendency in each situation here. The first example would be the favorite movies of students in the 7th grade. So think about that. You're going to take a survey. You're going to have a list of a bunch of movie titles. So which one of our measures of central tendency would you use? It's just a little bit tricky because you don't have any numerical data, right? So it's going to be a little hard to take an average when you just have words, correct? So what you probably want to do when you don't have numerical data is look to see to use the mode, because you want to know what answer people give most frequently. Okay, the most popular choice. That would be the mode. In the second example, we're going to look at daily high temperatures in a week in July. Daily high temperatures in a week in July. Okay, so if it's temperature, you do have numbers. So all the measures of central tendency are on the table. They're all options here. Because it's only for 1 week, your data is really limited. So chances are you don't have an outlier because you're looking at a real small period of time. So in this case, I would probably use the mean. And it's going to give you the best indicator what the temperature was that week. And what about the distance that students travel to school? Again, you're going to have numbers here. So we don't have to worry about using the mode, although you could. The distances students travel to school. Could there be outliers here? Yeah, there probably could. We probably have some people that live really far away and some people that live really close, like around the block. And whenever you have outliers, you probably don't want to use a mean. So I would probably use a median in this case. So what you have to do in this section is not only be able to calculate these measures of central tendency, but you also should be able to look at data and decide what measure of central tendency you should use when.